Okay, so I want you to imagine something with me for a second. You wake up on a Saturday morning. You've got a study seminar today, one of those extra credit weekend things at your community college. Criminal justice class. You've been looking forward to it because the guest speaker is supposed to be this former cop with 20 years of experience. Real-world stories, real cases, the kind of stuff the textbook doesn't give you. You grab a coffee. You drive in. You find a seat. There are 17 of you in the room, you know most of them. You're in the third floor seminar room, which has great windows and a door that clicks shut when you close it. You settle in. The speaker arrives. And everything is completely normal. Right up until the moment it isn't. 17 students walked into that room on a Saturday morning not knowing that the man standing at the front had already locked the exits. Not knowing he was armed. Not knowing he had chosen them, specifically, for something he had been planning for 4 months. What happens next, and how every single one of those 17 students walked out of that building alive, is the story we are telling today. This is the story of Harlow County Community College. February 7th, 2020. And the students who realized, one by one, exactly who they were trapped with. Before I tell you what happened inside that seminar room, I need to give you the full picture of Wade Tucker. Because understanding who he was, what had happened to him in the years before February 7th, is the only way to understand how someone ends up doing something like this. Wade Tucker was 52 years old. He had spent 21 years with the Harlow County Sheriff's Office. He had started as a patrol deputy, worked his way up to detective, and retired in 2017 after what his personnel file described as an honorable career. His colleagues respected him. His arrest record was solid. He had received a commendation in 2012 for his work on a missing persons case that had gone cold before he picked it up and cracked it. By any external measure, Wade Tucker was exactly the kind of person you'd invite to speak to a criminal justice class. He had the resume. He had the experience. He had the credibility. What most people didn't know, what had been kept in the professional equivalent of a bottom drawer, was that Tucker's retirement in 2017 had not been entirely voluntary. The forced retirement. In 2016, Tucker had been the subject of an internal affairs investigation. One of the cases he had been working, a local fraud case involving a Millfield businessman named Carl Obert, had resulted in Tucker making accusations that his supervisors considered unsupported. He had insisted that Obert had connections to organized crime that the department was actively suppressing. His supervisors said there was no evidence of that. Tucker said the evidence was being ignored. The investigation cleared Obert. Tucker filed a formal dissent. The department suggested he take early retirement. He took it. He told people it was voluntary. In the way that things described as voluntary often aren't. After retirement, Tucker became increasingly isolated. His marriage had ended in 2018. His ex-wife told investigators that the last 2 years of their marriage had been defined by his obsession with the Obert case and his growing belief that he had been, in his words, neutralized by people within the department who wanted that case closed. He moved into a single-bedroom apartment in Millfield. He stopped seeing most of his former colleagues. He spent a significant amount of time online, in forums and communities where conspiratorial thinking about law enforcement corruption had a large and receptive audience. And at some point in the autumn of 2019, the exact timeline was reconstructed by investigators from his digital records. Tucker's thinking had shifted from "I was wrong" to "someone has to answer for this." Why the college? Here's the thing about why Tucker chose Harlow County Community College's criminal justice program specifically. And this is a detail that I think is important for understanding the full scope of what he was planning. Tucker had contacted the program's coordinator, a woman named Professor Ellen Hayes, in November 2019. He had offered himself as a guest lecturer for their spring seminar series. He framed it as giving back to the community, sharing real-world experience with the next generation. Professor Hayes had accepted. She had been grateful. She had no reason not to be. What Tucker was choosing wasn't random. He was choosing a room full of people studying criminal justice. People who, in his view of the world, were going to enter a system he believed had corrupted itself. He had written, in a document found on his laptop after the event, that he wanted to deliver a message to people who would understand it. The students in that room were not chosen because of anything they had done. They were chosen because of what they were studying. Because of who Tucker had decided they represented. 17 students who had done nothing wrong, in a room they had every right to be in, chosen specifically because of what they hoped to become. Okay, so February 7th, 2020. A Saturday. Millfield, Ohio. 9 a.m. The seminar was scheduled to run from 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. 4 hours. Professor Hayes had confirmed the booking with Tucker the previous Tuesday. She had given him a visitor's pass, a parking permit, and a room assignment, Seminar Room 3C, third floor of the Kellner Academic Building. Professor Hayes was not in the building that morning. She had a prior family commitment and had arranged for a departmental teaching assistant, a grad student named Priya Okonkwo, to be present to introduce Tucker and manage logistics. Priya was 24. She was in her second year of a master's program in criminal justice policy. 17 students arrived for the seminar over the course of about 20 minutes. They were from the college's Criminal Justice Associate Degree program, a mix of ages, backgrounds, and career aspirations. Some wanted to work in law enforcement. Some wanted social work, legal aid, policy. They were, by the accounts of those who survived to describe them, a pretty normal group of people on a Saturday morning, some more awake than others, some with coffees, at least 2 who had clearly planned to sleep in and reconsidered. Tucker arrived at 9:04 a.m. He had a briefcase and a laptop bag. He was dressed professionally. Priya introduced him. He shook her hand. He smiled. He sat up at the front of the room. He connected his laptop to the projector. The first slide he showed was his resume, his sheriff's office career, his commendation, his specialties. Standard opening for a guest lecture. And then he said he needed a moment to attend to something before they started, and he walked to the seminar room door, opened it, looked into the corridor, and closed it again. And he didn't just close it. He turned the internal lock. One student, a 22-year-old named Marcus Webb, later told investigators that he had heard the lock click and had thought, for half a second, that it was strange. And then Tucker had turned back to the room and started talking, and Marcus had filed it away and forgot about it. The seminar began. The first 40 minutes. For the first 40 minutes, everything seemed normal. Tucker talked about his career. He talked about the realities of detective work versus what you see on television. He was engaging. Several students said later that he was genuinely good. That he had stories, that he was funny at times, that he knew how to hold a room. But students also noticed, in retrospect, a shift in the content around the 30-minute mark. Tucker moved away from talking about his career and began talking about what he called institutional failure. About how law enforcement was systematically compromised. About how the people who were supposed to hold the system accountable, the next generation, were being trained to step into a machine that had already decided what outcomes it wanted. A student named Rosa Delgado, 19, studying for a criminal justice associate degree, said later that around this point she had started feeling uncomfortable. Not alarmed. Just uncomfortable. Like the seminar was going somewhere she hadn't signed up for. Then, at 9:52 a.m., 48 minutes into the session, a student named Jordan Park raised his hand and said, politely, that the content seemed to be moving away from the stated seminar topics and asked if they would be getting back to the curriculum at some point. Tucker stopped. He looked at Jordan for a moment. And then he reached into his laptop bag. And everything changed. Okay. I want to be really careful with how I narrate this next section. Because what I'm describing is a traumatic event that real people went through, fictional real people in our story, but experiences that are based on real documented patterns from actual events. I'm not going to sensationalize this. I'm going to tell you what happened factually, and then I'm going to tell you why these students did what they did, because that is the part of this story that matters most. Wade Tucker, at 9:52 a.m., produced a firearm from his laptop bag. He did not immediately point it at anyone. He placed it on the table in front of him. He then told the room, calmly, in the same voice he had been using for 48 minutes, that they were not leaving until he had finished what he had come to say. 17 people in a locked room on the 3rd floor of a building. No phone signal boost. The Kellner building had well-documented cell signal issues on its upper floors, a fact that investigators later noted Tucker had almost certainly researched. A single locked door. No other exit. Now, here's what I want you to understand about those 17 students in the next few minutes. Most people, when they talk about mass killing scenarios and what people should do, describe a kind of paralysis. A freeze response. And that's real, it's a genuine physiological response to acute threat. But what happened in Seminar Room 3C at Harlow County Community College was not a room that froze. It was a room that, quietly, carefully, and with extraordinary collective intelligence, started working. The 6 minutes that changed everything. Within the first 2 minutes of Tucker producing the weapon, a student named Denise Okafor, 28, a single mother, former military medic, studying criminal justice before applying to law school, began, very quietly, counting. Not people. Exits. She looked at the door. She looked at the windows. She assessed the room's layout. She was doing, without being asked, what she had been trained to do. At the same time, Marcus Webb, the student who had noticed the door lock, had his phone under the table. The signal in the room was weak but not zero. He was trying to get a text out. He sent 3 texts in the first 4 minutes. The first 2 didn't go. The third one went through at 9:54 a.m. to his roommate, who fortunately happened to be awake and saw it immediately. The text said, Seminar Room 3C Kellner Building. Guy has a gun. Locked in. Call 911. 22 words. That text was the first notification Millfield PD received of the situation. It was received and acted on at 9:55 a.m. The entire Millfield PD response to this event was triggered by a 22-year-old sending a text message under a table at 9:54 in the morning. 22 words that saved 17 lives. Meanwhile, in the room, Tucker was still talking. He had prepared, investigators found this on his laptop, a 47-slide presentation. His plan was not to harm the students immediately. His plan was to deliver his message. The manifesto he had been building for 4 months, presented to an audience of criminal justice students who he believed would understand its significance. This gave the students time. Not a lot, but some. Priya's decision. Priya Okonkwo, the 24-year-old teaching assistant who had introduced Tucker that morning, made a decision at approximately 9:57 a.m. that the students who survived will tell you saved multiple lives. Tucker, during his monologue, had moved away from the table where he'd placed the weapon. He was animated, gesturing, pacing slightly. The weapon was unattended. Priya was seated in the row nearest to the front of the room. She did not lunge for it. She did not do anything dramatic. She quietly, over the course of about 90 seconds, shifted herself in her seat so that she was positioned slightly closer to the table than she had been. And then she waited. She later told investigators that she had not had a plan beyond positioning. She had not known if she would be able to act. She had simply decided that if the opportunity came, she would be as close as possible to it. At 9:59 a.m., Tucker turned to his presentation to advance a slide. He had his back to the room for approximately 3 seconds. Priya moved. She reached the table. She got the weapon. And at the same moment, and this is the part that investigators and the students themselves have described as almost impossibly coordinated for something that was not coordinated at all, Denise Okafor stood up from her seat at the back of the room, shouted Tucker's name to draw his attention away from Priya, and Marcus Webb, from the side of the room, threw his coffee thermos at the projector screen. 3 people. 3 separate decisions. Made in the same 3 seconds. Nobody told them to. Nobody planned it. They just all read the same moment. Okay, so let me walk you through what happened in the next 4 minutes, because it happened fast and I want to be precise about it. When Tucker turned back to the room at 9:59 a.m., Priya had the weapon. She had stepped back from the table. Tucker did not immediately advance toward her. He froze for approximately 2 seconds, which 2 seconds the students used. Denise moved to the door. She had, in the preceding minutes, studied the lock mechanism. She had a clear line of sight to it from her seat. She knew exactly what it was and how it operated. She had the door open in under 10 seconds. Students began moving through the door. Tucker moved toward Priya. Marcus stepped between them, not as a hero moment, he said later, but because he was the closest person standing and his body just went there before his brain gave it a direction. All 17 students were out of the room and in the corridor within 40 seconds of the door being unlocked. Tucker did not follow them into the corridor. Millfield PD officers arrived on the 3rd floor of the Kellner building at 10:06 a.m., 12 minutes after Marcus's text went through. They found Tucker alone in seminar room 3C, seated at the table where he had placed his weapon at the start of the event. The weapon was on the floor near the door, where Priya had placed it before leaving the room. Tucker was not physically resisting. He was placed under arrest without incident. 12 minutes. 17 students, 0 fatalities. In 12 minutes, a room full of people who had never trained for exactly this situation did more things right than most of us could reasonably hope to do under those conditions. The investigation. The investigation that followed Tucker's arrest produced a picture that, I will be honest with you, made the prosecutor's job both easier and more complicated than you might expect. Easier, because the evidence was abundant. Tucker's laptop contained the 47-slide presentation, his 4-month planning journal, research notes on the Kellner building's layout and cell signal characteristics, and a document that the prosecution described in their filing as a manifesto, approximately 6,000 words detailing his grievances, his justification for the event, and his intended message to the students he had selected. More complicated, because Tucker's defense team, led by a Columbus attorney named Harold Yates, filed a psychiatric defense. They argued that Tucker's 4-month planning spiral, his conspiracy thinking, and his belief that he could deliver a meaningful message through an act of armed captivity were evidence of a delusional disorder that had gone undiagnosed and untreated since his retirement. The prosecution argued, and the jury ultimately agreed, that the depth and detail of Tucker's planning was inconsistent with psychotic delusion. They argued that a man who researches cell signal patterns in a building, obtains a visitor's pass through legitimate channels over a period of weeks, and prepares a 47-slide presentation is a man who is functioning within reality well enough to be criminally responsible for his decisions. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Wade Tucker was convicted on 17 counts of aggravated menacing, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of possession of a weapon under disability. He was sentenced to 22 years. He will be 74 years old when he is first eligible for parole. I want to spend some time on Marcus, Priya, and Denise before we close out, because I think in cases like this, there is a tendency to describe what people did as heroic in a way that somehow elevates it out of reach, makes it feel like something only a specific kind of person is capable of. And I genuinely don't think that's true here. And I think they would say so themselves. Marcus Webb. Marcus was 22. He was studying criminal justice because he wanted to eventually work in juvenile justice. He had been through the system himself as a teenager and had a specific, personal understanding of where it fell short. He had no law enforcement training. He had no tactical training. He noticed a door lock and filed it away, and when the moment came, he had his phone under a table and he sent a text. He said in an interview given about a year after the event that the most important thing he did was not panic in those first 2 minutes. He said he had told himself, do the next thing. Just do the next thing. He said he hadn't known what the next thing would be when he told himself that. He just knew that sitting completely still and waiting wasn't it. Denise Okafor. Denise was 28. Former military medic. She had deployed twice and had seen situations under stress that most people in that room had not. But she was very clear in her testimony and her interviews about something important. She had not acted because of her training. She had acted because she had decided, in the first 90 seconds, that acting was the only option that made sense. She said the training gave her a framework, something to reach for when her brain needed structure. But she said the decision to reach was entirely her own. She said she had looked around that room at 16 other people and she had thought, someone is going to do something. And then she had thought, it can be me. Priya Okonkwo. Priya had introduced Tucker that morning. She had shaken his hand. She had thanked him for coming. She told investigators that in the immediate aftermath, in the corridor, waiting for police, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, the thing she felt most strongly was not relief. It was something she described as a kind of furious clarity. She said she was angry in a way that was completely cold and completely focused. Not at herself. At what had been done to those students. She completed her master's degree in 2021. She is now working in campus security policy at a university in the Midwest. When journalists have asked her if she considers what she did heroic, she gives a version of the same answer every time. Okay. So that's the story of February 7th, 2020 at Harlow County Community College. And I want to say something before we wrap up, because this is one of those cases where I feel like it would be wrong to just end on the verdict and the sentencing and call it a day. 17 people went into that room. 17 came out. And I know the instinct is to immediately go to the word miracle, and I get it, I understand why people use it. But I don't think it was a miracle. I think it was people. People who were scared and who found ways to be useful within their fear. People who read a room and a moment and acted. People who, when everything said freeze, found a way to move. I also think this case is worth knowing about because of what it tells us about the warning signs that were present and that didn't get connected in time. Tucker's isolation after retirement. His fixation on a specific grievance. His increasing withdrawal from the people who had known him professionally. His online activity in the months before February 7th. None of these things, individually, triggered a response. Together, they formed a picture that, in retrospect, was clear. These patterns exist in a lot of cases. Knowing them matters. And I want to say one more thing about Wade Tucker. Not to excuse him. Nothing he did is excusable. But I think it's worth noting that he was also a person who had, genuinely, experienced something that felt unjust. His complaint about the Obert case may or may not have had merit. His sense that his career had been ended before he was ready to leave it was probably real. Genuine grievances, processed in isolation, with no support and no outlet, can become something very different from what they started as. That matters too. Not for how we judge what Tucker did, but for how we think about what could have happened differently years before that Saturday morning. 17 students. 0 fatalities. A 22-year-old with a phone under a table. A 24-year-old who positioned herself 90 seconds before she needed to be positioned. A 28-year-old who decided that it could be her. That's the story. If this one got to you, drop it in the comments. I want to know which moment hit hardest. And I want to know what you think about how the warning signs were missed. Because that's a conversation I think matters, and I always find that this community has smart things to say about it. Like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And the Patreon link is in the description if you want to support the channel and get access to extended content including deep dives on the legal proceedings in cases like this one. I'll be back next week with another one. Take care of yourselves. Look out for each other. And I'll talk to you soon.